One thing that's been capturing my attention a lot recently has been AI more broadly. AI has very much been the latest tech hype cycle. Whether we think it might something useful and good might come out of it is a different question. It's certainly the term that everyone wants to cram into whatever product or service they're selling at the moment is AI. One of a few kind of first products that has come out that has suggested that it's really going to use this technology in a game-changing way has been a product called the Humane AI Pin. So the idea behind this product is that it is going to use AI and the kind of all the sort of automation that sort of enables to kind of push us beyond needing to look at phones so much, right? The idea is that in this understanding of why we use our phones so much, it is because we have to do all the tippy-tappy to find the actual thing we're looking for, the information we're looking for, or to send the message or whatever. The idea behind this is, well, if AI can automate a lot of that busy work that we have to type for, then we won't need our phones and we can sort of interact with the world much more. Which I think is was one of the sort of pitches behind the Apple Watch, right? Was that, because you can just look at your notifications, you won't get your phone out, you won't get lost in it. It was one of the things behind the original Google Glass was that, because you can just sort of look up, you can still be talking to someone. Despite the fact that maybe just reading your text messages whilst you're chatting to someone is probably, if there is an international sort of understanding of a thing that is rude, it's probably looking at your watch whilst you're chatting to someone. Now, I would assume that most people releasing a tech-based product, like the gold standard for your launch, whatever the reception it receives is, would be that you get coverage from all of these outlets. And they have managed to get all of that coverage. And then all of the reviews are just that this thing does not work. I think the first iteration of a lot of products isn't particularly fantastic, right? I think the first Apple Watch could only do things through your phone, so it couldn't do a huge amount on the device itself, so it always had to be linked to your phone, and if you didn't have your phone with you, it kind of didn't really do a huge lot, and that wasn't great. Didn't really have any apps. The battery wasn't particularly good at all, but it was at least a kind of functioning device. This thing overheats. It can't understand accents in words. It's just fascinating to me how this has managed to get such huge coverage, and it's interesting the extent, the things that it shows us about how this industry works in terms of what does get covered and what doesn't. And I'm interested in what the next steps for the AI cycle are. Yeah, I've got the I've paid for the GPT-4 thing to try and work out what I can get it to work for, and if there is some uses for it. What I've tended to find is that it works okay as a plain language Google search, essentially. Google, even before it, recently Google's been going a bit weird anyway. I think they're trying to use AI or machine learning to resort what comes up when you search for stuff, and it's actually made it more and more difficult to use. But the way that ChatGPT works means that you can just type in a question as you would say it to someone, to a human being that you're asking, and it will give you a response, right? I think has the potential to be quite interesting and quite useful. Sometimes when I'm working on something, I can end up so in the weeds on a topic, so focused on some specific detail of a particular topic, that I'm actually, I just need to to recenter myself. I need to read the simplest explanation of this event. And Wikipedia can be quite good for that. It's just a way of going like, okay, I want to look at the simple overview, and that's going to help me so that when I'm reading more specific, like whether it's academic articles, whether it's book chapters, I sort of know how they piece into the wider picture, if that makes sense. And one thing that ChatGPT is quite good at is doing that, but for a topic which is more specific than Wikipedia would have. But there are some things that I think something that it feels like a tool like ChatGPT should be able to do that it simply cannot. Like there was a thing where I had a pie chart that a sort of journalistic article had put together, and it had broken down different percentages of local city councils in the UK. It had broken down percentages of where their income had come from, and it referenced this data to a government PDF. And I wanted to use the data in a slightly different way. I wanted to find the specific part of that PDF that data had come from. And so I thought, well, I'll upload this PDF to ChatGPT and I'll say, so if I've got a pie chart that tells me this information, can you tell me which part of this PDF that data has been come from? Like, it might be simplified, it might be reworded. I think I sort of gave it a few things. Which felt like exactly the kind of task which is difficult and time-consuming for me to do, but for a tool like ChatGPT should be much simpler, right? Because it's very much a case of kind of looking for comparing two bits of information, looking for the ones that are the same, and it just could not do that. That was like so far beyond anything that it wanted to do or could do. I will ask it questions that feel like it should be able to put where I'm kind of trying to just use it like a natural language version of Google. So for example, there have been some times where I've been trying to find data for this upcoming video about the local councils, and this feels like the kind of task it should be quite good at, but it will suddenly just go, some places you could consider searching for this information are X, Y, Z. And like, it's true, those are places that you can look up and find that information. However, I was sort of hoping that ChatGPT would be able to point me directly to a specific place that has that information, rather than just giving me some suggestions as to where I might look. It feels like the initial kind of feeling when ChatGPT first launched, and when a lot of these AI tools first launched, was that kind of like, look what it can do now. In a year's time, it's going to be infinitely better than this. It's going to build on this so much and just be like a, this is a taster of what it could be. And as someone who's used it fairly regularly over the past 6 months, or kind of tried to use it, I guess, I think is probably a better explanation for what my relationship to it has been. It feels like it has kind of stagnated a little bit. So I think there are likely to be some really interesting implementations, uses for AI going forwards. It is fascinating that the ones that have got all the coverage have been not those that actually seem to be doing things that are exciting, but just the things that are able to gain the most hype. Right? Tao is making the really good point here that a lot of the jumps from ChatGPT 2 to ChatGPT 3 to ChatGPT 4 were that they were able to feed it more training data, but that's kind of hitting a limit. So one of the challenges is that they're literally running out of stuff to feed into it. Another challenge of it is that media companies and such are becoming a little bit more aware of it, and that means that copyright is suddenly becoming a big issue. So Sora, for anyone that doesn't know, is OpenAI's sort of, is it a new model, or is it just a new, someone might be able to tell me in the chat whether it's like a new model or is it just a new implementation of that model. But it's OpenAI's product for producing video, right? So rather than typing in a prompt and you get a text response back, or rather than typing in a prompt like in Mid-Journey and then you get an image back, you get a whole video. Oh, thank you, Max. It is a completely new model and it's very large, and like it's potentially quite interesting, right? From a point of view of, you have a creative idea but you don't have the resources to bring it to life. Like, can you use AI to do that. One thing that, you do find with real footage is that at the very least, if we're making a video about the European Union, right, and for a kind of classic piece of establishing footage, I want to include a clip of Brussels in there, right? If I go to Getty Images and I buy a piece of footage of Brussels, I know, unless they have outright lied to me, that is a piece of footage of Brussels. I don't need to have been to Brussels and to have a photographic memory and to be able to do spot the difference to work out whether or not that is Brussels. However, if I am using an AI tool like this and I want some footage of Brussels and I kind of go establishing shot of Brussels and whack that in, then to know that is accurate, actually I need to have a pretty good knowledge of Brussels, or else there's the potential that I put that footage into a video that I'm making and, it is incorrect. A couple of years ago, I made a video about the politics surrounding COVID vaccines, right? And in that, I used some footage of people getting vaccines, I guess. If I bought some footage of someone administering a COVID-19 vaccine, that's real footage, and I can be fairly sure that because this is old news footage of someone administering a COVID-19 vaccine, I can be fairly sure this is how COVID-19 vaccines are administered, right? If I then type that into a AI tool instead, then if I have not been around the administering of a whole bunch of COVID vaccines, there's a strong chance that I accidentally put in a bit of footage that is incorrect, right? That shows, I don't know, someone getting a vaccine in the top of their skull or something. And it's the same for historical things, right? I'm like, I want some footage of something happening in World War II, and something as small as the badges are wrong on a jacket, something as big as the armies are going in the wrong direction, right? If you're using real footage, you know that thing happened, you know it happened the way it happened, you can be fairly sure that it is reliable. Unless Getty has turned around and sold you something that is incorrect and they've not done their work, right? The system is not entirely perfect, as we saw with the Kate Middleton photo thing, right? I'm sort of someone who's relatively scrupulous about these things and does think about them. If you've got someone who is making science content or whatever and is a bit more content farm-y and doesn't really care all that much, then potentially they end up chucking in loads and loads of stuff which just is not accurate, whether intentionally or whether by laziness or whatever. I do get a lot of AI stuff on Twitter. I seem to get a lot of marketing stuff, but not necessarily me being marketed to, but a lot of people being the 10 best Nike ads from the 1990s. And you can always tell the AI ones because the responses from ChatGPT and stuff get less good the further on you go. It tends to sort of forget what you asked it to do gradually. And so what tends to happen is that by about number 6 or 7 on the list, actually, maybe it's still Nike ads, but some of them didn't happen in the 1990s, or they're not real Nike ads, they're potential ones, or maybe it's talking about giveaways or something that actually isn't adverts and is less relevant. Yeah, so these also get a lot of AI bot responses. A lot of the replies on Twitter now, the top 3 replies will be someone will have tried to summarize the tweets that someone else has said, and sometimes it's a really short tweet, and yet it will nevertheless have someone having just responded to it going, the person said this. And then a bunch of I agree, good point. I'm sure you'll have all seen the kind of dead internet theory, right? Which I don't think is entirely, I don't think is true, right? I'm aware that I'm using the internet, you're using the internet. There are definitely, most people I know are in some way using the internet, therefore there are almost certainly people still using it. But it does feel like that thing whereby so many of the spaces you end up in are just like bots chatting to each other. And in fact, that has been the experience of Twitter over the last kind of year, is that it's just become kind of baggy, I think is the way I'd describe it. Like it's harder and harder to find the information that you want, because the top 3 replies are always something nonsense, and because there's all this kind of like spam around absolutely everything. I'm still interested to see where this kind of AI wave goes, but I think we might have at least hit a bit of a stumbling block.